From real estate to real life and everything in between. The Brad Weisman Show. And now, your host, Brad Weisman.
All right. Thanks for coming and checking us out every Thursday at 7 o'clock. We really appreciate it. You know, we know you have a lot of choices to make. You have a lot of podcasts out there. And we love it that the fact that you're listening to us. So we appreciate that so much. We want to talk about our sponsors, Comfort Pro. Thanks for them as a sponsor. And also, we have another sponsor too, and I'm going to bring that up later on. But right now, we're going to bring in our guest. Our guest is Jeremy Ryan Slate. This guy, I've been trying to get on here forever. He canceled on me like 15 times, said that we're not good enough and all kinds of other stuff. And then we kind of coaxed him. And I think Hugo said he was going to bust his kneecaps if he didn't come on. That's probably what happened.
Hey, I'm from New Jersey though, man. I know a guy.
Yeah, I was going to say you guys actually do bust kneecaps. I should be quiet because in Pennsylvania we don't do that kind of stuff. You know, we tip cows over. That's what we do here. We tip. Cows,
we tip cows over here too, man.
I'm
in Northwest New Jersey, man. I grew up working on a farm and stuff.
Okay, that's cool. That's pretty much Pennsylvania. Pretty much. We were just up your way not too long ago. A place called Crystal Springs.
Crystal Springs is literally in my backyard. The golf balls used to hit the side of my house.
You're kidding me. I was just there. Several weeks ago. What a beautiful resort. Oh my gosh, is that really, really gorgeous up there?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely beautiful. So the one behind me is Wild Turkey. It's one of the golf courses kind of in that that group. But like you'd be out there and you'd have a golf ball hit the side of the house. I can't tell you how many times we replaced siding and everything. It was fun.
Oh, geez, that's crazy. That's crazy. So I have Jeremy on because I was looking you up a couple times. You actually have booked some guests on our show also. I think that's how we originally kind of met up here. You have a company called Command Your Brand. You wrote a book called Command Your Brand. Tell me about this Command Your Brand. And I believe your wife is your partner.
Yeah, so we started the company back in 2016 because I've had a podcast since 2014. The first go around wasn't so good, but the second one was in 2015, and we had people start asking for help. And my wife's had a background in PR and everything, so we ended up starting this company to help people produce podcasts. And what ended up happening is we were working with a lot of busy CEOs and founders, and one of the things we did when we launched shows was put people on shows. So we ended up just focusing on that. We've actually, I guess, full circle enough now, almost 10 years down the road, started actually producing podcasts again now as kind of YouTube has kind of become big in the podcast world. But what we really do is we're a PR firm for the podcast space. We help shows to find great guests and great guests to find great shows.
Awesome. Yeah. And you're doing a great job. I've had, like I said, I'm pretty sure I had a couple people on here that were from your company that we had on the show and it always went really well. And we're pretty picky now too. Hugo's really picky. I'll tell you, He doesn't let anybody get through the gate.
He'll bust your kneecaps if you do get through.
That's right. That's what he does. He's good at it. So let's talk about this. The podcast thing, we were just talking about this a little bit before we went live, has just gone crazy. And I didn't know any of the stats until I was looking at your website. Your Command Your Brand website about, talking about where this has gone. And you mentioned what's happening right now since the election. And also it's been happening over some time. People are getting their information from podcasts because they're trusting that source more than any other source.
So we're seeing, actually, it's interesting, Brad. It's like legacy media is kind of in its death throes, and I think this presidential election was a big piece of that because you look at a lot of the larger channels were, I guess you could say, in the bag for one candidate, and they tried to just kind of promote that. And what ended up happening is we had another candidate putting all of his attention on podcasts, and it was the groundswell of attention was really interesting from that. And I think also as well, even through the pandemic and everything, we saw people going to different sources for their information. Because I think what we've seen is legacy media is kind of, and when I say legacy media, I mean like television, newspapers, things like that.
Yeah.
They've been the gatekeeper for a long, long time. And they want to decide what you get to learn or what you get to know. And I think we're at this kind of interesting place in time now where, whether it's Netflix or whether it's Audible or whether it's podcasts, the user wants to go find the information for themselves from the particular person they want to get it from. And I think we're in this really interesting world now where, and this stat was like 2 years ago, but one episode of Joe Rogan is like more than the nightly lineup of most news stations.
That's incredible.
We've really gotten to this place where legacy media is in its death throes. And I think that the interesting part about it too is they don't really understand what to do with podcasts. You and I were talking before we started recording here about how NPR basically tried to, monetize and build the network. And what we're finding is it's really this independent world of creators that are figuring out how to get their own message out, how to educate, and also how to monetize their message, which I think is a big piece of it as well, rather than networks coming out and building a studio and putting, kind of this whole structure around it like they've done for media for years. It's kind of, in some ways, it's the Wild West, and in other ways, it's a lot of opportunity, man.
Yeah, it is incredible that you're saying, when you said about Joe Rogan having a better following than some of these, these huge networks that are out there. And I did just read that Comcast is looking to drop some of these big shows because they're finding out that the people that are running them, the actual people that are there, the anchors, are not, for some times, not telling the truth, and sometimes they're just not following what that their audience is looking for. They always say in sales, you got to know your audience, and if you don't know what your audience is looking for, or who your audience is, that can be damaging if you're saying something completely opposite.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because I had read, I think Rachel Maddow's salary was something like 25 million a year, or you look at I think
That's
Caitlin
really close to
Collins.
yours, right?
Yeah, I wish. Or Caitlin Collins, I think on CNN makes like 5 million a year, and
Yeah.
it's just wild to me because you look at kind of, I don't know, that's more like how a professional athlete is paid.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know that they're generating the numbers or attention or anything that a lot of these different things are. Tim Pool from Timcast IRL was saying recently that one of their streamed episodes that streams every night at 8 o'clock is more than the entire weekend of CNN. So it's like we're just kind of seeing people go a different direction. And at the moment, legacy media doesn't know what to do, because I know CNN, if you remember, tried to launch that CNN Plus app, and
Yeah.
they couldn't
Yeah.
get enough
Yep.
users to even make it viable. Because what's happening now is the user chooses, and if the user likes it, it survives. If it doesn't, it crashes. And I think that's what's really interesting about this world we're going in, because if it's good content, you get to continue making it. If it's not, there's no one to consume it.
Are your kitchen and bathroom remodels a little overdue? Well, now's your chance to call First Response Contracting. John Sellers will take care of you. 484-256-7136. They do residential and commercial, and they're licensed and insured. Give them a call at 484-256-7136. Yeah. And because, it's funny, when you think about years ago, it was all by the Nielsen ratings. You remember the Nielsen ratings? I don't know if you remember. That's
I remember Nielsen ratings, but even like you can get into radio ratings. That's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, but think about it. They used to actually call our house and say, "What show do you watch? Which news program do you watch?" This is years ago when I was a kid. I'm pretty much older than you. I know that, but they would actually do that, and now it's instantaneous. We know this second if who's watching the show. We know how many people are watching the show. So you get that information so quick. And if they want to turn you off, they'll turn you off. There's a lot of choices. I mean, how many podcasts are out there right now? As an average, I mean, is it 100 million? Is there 60 million? Is there 20 million? I mean, do you have any idea how many podcasts are being produced?
So this number's up and down, but it's somewhere around 3.5 million is about where we stand at the moment. But now the thing you have to consider is somewhere around, once again, I haven't seen there's this annual report that comes every year that Edison Research does about the podcast world. So I haven't seen this year's yet. But it's around 20% of that 3.5 million that are actually active.
Wow.
Now that means like producing an episode like at least once a month.
Right,
so that's about 80% of it that launch a show and either do 5 episodes or 10 episodes and then just kind of, go on by the wayside. So it is a very, very large world. But at the same time, if you think about it as an individual creator, you only have to fight with 20% of that 3.5 million. So if you do a good job and really service a particular market, there's a lot you can do with that. And what I find, Brad, is a lot of people try to go way too broad. Everyone wants to recreate the Joe Rogan experience where they have these inside jokes with people they know and do these long conversations. And for most people, that's not going to work. You have to service a very particular market, whether it's, you're talking to people in the real estate world, or you're talking to people in the sales world or the marketing world, or whatever it might be, or even look at my show. We've changed a lot over the years, and dude, I'm talking about a lot of like history stuff now, and
you're like the Roman Empire guy. This is the strangest thing. I mean, we'll get into that, but I just Let's go into that for sure, because that's the part that freaked me out. When I saw some of your shows, I'm like, this guy knows his shit when it comes to Roman Empire, and I don't think I've ever met anybody that was really up on that.
Well, it's like I've found a niche, and I've done a lot of different things over the years. I think the thing that's tough with a podcast is a lot of times people think when they create this thing, it always has to continue to be the same thing, which isn't necessarily true. The title can change, what you talk about can change, and really over the years, my show has grown and developed. When we first started, we talked more about lifestyle design and entrepreneurship and stuff like that. But at the same time, my interests have changed a lot. My master's degree is in Roman Emperor worship, and I tend to say the Roman Empire because it makes it easier for people to understand. But I actually looked at like how the cult of Roman Emperor worship started. So for me on my own show now, a lot of times I'm covering more historical subjects. Like we did an episode recently about how before the American Revolution, there was one of the Canadian colonies in Quebec. The way that they reacted actually caused part of what led to the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. So I'm looking at a lot of these like really interesting historical subjects and trying to learn stuff about it. Or I just had on today's episode, we had Sean Stone, who's the son of director Oliver Stone, and we did on a episode on one of their documentaries they put together. So I'm really trying to dive into historical subjects, man.
Yeah, no, I think I saw part of that. I know what you're talking about, that show. Yeah, that's incredible. So the podcast thing, do we think that it's gonna keep going in this direction? It's no longer like we used to think it was like a fad, because I think at one point podcasts took off, it kind of mellowed out, and then all of a sudden it really took off again. And I think it's on this trajectory that's like kind of crazy. Where even my parents are listening to podcasts. I never thought I'd hear my dad say I was listening to podcasts the other day. I mean, that's incredible, because that's a totally different generation.
Well, I think also the thing people have to understand is going back to your Nielsen rating things too. Like let's take a look at how for most of time before they went digital, radio did their stats. There was this thing called a PPM, or a personal people meter. It's kind of like a beeper you kept in your pocket, and you would click on it when you're listening to something.
Oh, I remember
They would then take that small sample and multiply it by the population size of a city and be like, our listening market is this many thousands or millions of people, which is wild. So they really don't know who's listening. So the thing that's different then, because of that, people are used to hearing these big bloated numbers, like this many million or this many tens of thousands. And the thing that's different with podcasts is you don't need a huge market to make an impact. You can have, the right 100 people, the right 1,000 people, the right 10,000 people, and you've got a really, really great either feeder line to your current business or business in itself. And I think we're seeing this become a piece of culture. I'm seeing billboards for podcasts. I'm hearing people having conversations about podcasts. I know even for myself, I get a lot of my sports from podcasts now. I'm a huge Yankees fan. So I listen to Talking Yanks or the John Boy Media podcast or Bronx Pinstripes. So you kind of really get to really dive in on these very particular topics and really be niche, where it's not these broad topic shows anymore. And I think that's what we're seeing kind of in this world of new media.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. And the thing I wrote down here when I was thinking about what having you on the show was do you think we're getting oversaturated though with podcasts? Is it to the point now where there's so many new ones? Because we're talking about telling stories, but we're also talking about giving information. And I think podcasts first started as just stories, but I think it's becoming an information source too. Kind of like, let's Google it.
Well, I think the thing you have to consider is for a while, there was a lot of people trying to do like the same model, right?
Yeah.
We're going to have an entrepreneurship show and I'm going to talk to entrepreneurs and we're going to do it 7 days a week or 5 days a week, whatever it might be. And like, you don't really have an interesting angle. So I think with where we're at now, you have to have a very interesting and individualized angle and on a very niche topic. You can kind of do a one or the other there, right? So for example, I listen to a Roman history podcast. I absolutely love that. You wouldn't have think that, right?
I bet the guy's really old.
Surprisingly, no.
He's from the Roman Empire.
He's about my age, surprisingly.
It's amazing.
But the thing you have to consider is you have to service a very particular market. And I think if you're going to do that, it's not going to be oversaturated. If you're going to try and do just what everybody else is doing, like, the latest comedian launches a podcast and wonders why it didn't work, it has to be servicing a particular market in a particular way. Otherwise, there's going to fall on deaf ears, right? And I think that's the thing to really consider. I think people try to approach podcasting like they approach social media. That I'm going to take the same post and put it on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok or whatever it is, and I'm also going to make a podcast about it. That's that's not really what it is. You have to make a podcast for a very particular purpose or a very particular topic. And as you mentioned, it's an educational platform. People are coming to these things to learn something.
Yeah.
So they're not here to part of it is entertainment. Don't get me wrong, Brad. Like you have to be entertained or people aren't going to listen very long. But a bigger part of it is there has to be information here that people are going to walk away with.
That's so true. So true. So one other question too. Do you find a lot of competition in the Roman Empire propaganda stuff? Do you find is there a lot of them doing that? Or are you kind of one of the only ones that's doing that?
So there's a few people doing it, but here's the thing I'll say is, I'm not the smartest person in any room I walk into. And because of that, I think that's actually a huge asset because I take history and I make it make sense for regular people. And I think that's what you have to look at with your subject as well. Like you don't have to know everything about it. You don't have to be the smartest person about it. But if you can make it communicate to people, Kurt Cobain, back in the days of Nirvana used to talk about if you're going to write a song, write it on a third grade level and it'll do really well. And I think that's what you have to really consider is you want to make something that communicates. I think very often people think they have to know everything about a topic. Do I know everything about Rome? Absolutely not. But I can make it make sense to a regular person where they can walk away from that and actually find information they can use in their daily lives. And I think that's the more important part of it.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So, so the name of your podcast now? You is it Create Your Own Life podcast or is it a different podcast now?
It's called the Jeremy Ryan Slate Show now. We changed it about 6 months ago or so. And it's for the simple reason, which is funny because I used to give people the advice, don't use your name. But what ended up happening, Brad, is because I did all these Roman Empire podcasts, I started getting a lot more hits for my name. So I was finding people couldn't find my show because they were looking for my name.
Hey guys, I want to take a second and thank Comfort Pro. Since 2001, Comfort Pro has been helping customers stay comfortable where they live, work, and play. They have 24/7 emergency service and a 100% customer satisfaction guarantee. If you need help with your heating and air conditioning or indoor air quality, call Comfort Pro at 484-917-1803. Mention the show and receive a free humidifier with the installation of a complete system. Yeah.
And because of that, it was really just a search optimization thing. Like, what is the main search people are looking for? Like, I'm a tech guy at heart. So I'm looking at, what searches are landing on me. What topics are people looking for on YouTube? These are different things I'm looking at to see how can I do a better job to help people find me.
It's funny because we started out as the show was called Real Estate and You, and it got to a point where we did the same thing was let's change it to my name just because people locally know me from being in real estate for 30 some years. And it was instead of trying to find the real estate podcast, which is a gazillion of them, you just search my name and now it pops up and it's pretty easy that way. So I get that.
From a personal brand perspective, it's really smart, right? Because you're giving people another way to find you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, let's talk. It said that there's recent studies say there's over 100 million Americans listening to podcasts each month. That number blew my mind. That there's, that's like a third of America. How many is there? 400 million. There's like a third of the United States is listening to podcasts.
Well, we don't know how many people are actually here anymore, but anyway, I'm sorry, I couldn't.
We won't go there though. Oh my God! Woo, there goes the show. Hey, I used to have a podcast.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself
until Jeremy was on. I think we're on the same page. We just don't want to go dig into that too much.
No. The thing I would say though is I think it's become ubiquitous, right? We've gotten to a point where they're a part of people's daily lives, and I don't know about you, like I'm typically listening to a podcast when I'm getting ready in the morning. Most of the time, I'm not even listening to music at the gym anymore. I'm listening to a podcast, and I think for a lot of people, they've become a part of their daily lives, and to think that at least a third, possibly more of Americans are listening to podcasts. Like that's a really big deal. Incredible. It's not just this, thing that's nice to have or nice to do anymore. It is something that it's a channel you have to be on. And trust me, Brad, in the coming years, it's only going to get bigger because we're seeing media change. We're kind of in this, we're kind of at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. That's kind of a nice way to put it. That's like kind of where we're at in time. Whereas everything changes, we're kind of at the epicenter of where it's going to change. This is a time where you have to get in and kind of like grab your place of ground or you're going to get in too late.
Yeah. And it's funny. You wonder if these big networks are actually scared shitless about these podcasts now, like the Joe Rogans and even Ed Milet, I love Ed Milet. He's one of my favorite podcasts, actually. I listen to him pretty much almost 3-4 times a week. And, those things are so uplifting. And something he mentions all the time that I love is that we have never been in a time where you can listen to a podcast of a person that's very, very successful on his show and really hear and learn how they got to where they are. And you can hear Ed Milet dissecting them as a person. And we've never had that. You could read their book, but you never had that front row seat into them actually talking about it and learning that way. It's a completely different situation.
Well, the level of access is incredible, and this even goes back to like just the idea of free speech as well, because if you look at in different points in history, like to have great conversations or have great discourse is how we get to better ideas. And throughout history, whether it's in the Roman Empire, one of these other areas, speech was very controlled. It's been very controlled throughout history, and we're kind of in this new world of we can have better ideas, we can have better conversations, and we can shape better better ideas. And it's just something we could never do before. The ability to access people and ideas, like it really is incredible. And I think that's one of the reasons we're also seeing technology speed up so much, because we have so much more access to ideas to have a larger scope of people think on them.
Yeah, it's amazing. Totally amazing. So tell me about your company. Let's get into that before we wrap it up. Let's what do you do? Like what's your company and how, tell the audience, maybe there's gotta be people out there that are looking to start a podcast. I think I get probably 4 or 5 people every couple months that say, hey, how do I start this? How do I do this? What am I doing? So give us a little information about that.
Well, there's 2 parts to what we do. The first is, as I mentioned, we're a PR firm for the podcast industry. So we help people to get down their story, help them to find out like, well, what is the right market you have to communicate to and how do you communicate to them? And then we run them on a campaign over a year to help them be on the right podcast and get their message out. Because really what we've seen is a lot of people aren't thinking long-term enough with this. And we used to run like shorter programs, like 3 and 6 months. And we just find if somebody's really going to get the message out there and change hearts and minds, it's kind of more of a long-term thing. So that's our main program. In the last 6 months, we started producing podcasts again, which is funny because that's where we started. The advent of all this AI technology has made it so much more affordable to create a really great show for people. So we're doing that in addition to optimizing them for YouTube as well, because I think the world we're in right now, YouTube is like the number 1 place for discoverability. So you just absolutely have to be there.
Yeah, I agree with that. YouTube is it's amazing. I just switched over to YouTube TV. I'm getting rid of cable. I'm cutting the cord. I'm sick of it. Too much.
I got my dad to cut Direct TV not too long ago because they were paying like, I think, I don't even know how he was doing this, but he was paying like $320 a month for his Direct TV.
Mine's $300 a month. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm done. And we're not a TV family. We hardly ever watch TV. I never understood how we get this.
We cut him down to YouTube TV, and I think he's paying like $90.
Yeah, that's all it is. Yep.
What?
Yep. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Totally unbelievable. So so is there anything else that you want to talk about or anything you want to bring up? We're gonna wrap this up.
Well, I would just say that the thing people have to understand is this is kind of a time point in history where you got to jump in and start getting your own message out there, because a lot of times the media is only going to cover you unless you've been arrested or did something illegal. You'd have to really be able to, you know what I mean? Because I think I've talked to people before that they're like, well, I'm just going to wait until the media discovers me and gets my message out. And that's just not how it works. You have to be out there continually banging the drum, continually building the message. There's a guy for years, Guy Kawasaki, that's called himself a brand evangelist. And that's what you have to think of yourself. You have to be out there as an evangelist, getting your story out there, changing hearts and minds. And I think with podcasts and with this kind of new media world we have right now, there is no better opportunity than right now to get your message out and actually communicate to real people and get communication back. And I think once you start to get that communication back from your market, it's like nothing else you've experienced before.
I agree, man. That's awesome. Very cool. I love what you're doing. I love how you're building the brand for other people too. It's amazing. So keep up the good work. We'll be talking to you again real soon. All right, there we go. All right. Jeremy Ryan Slate, commandyourbrand.com. You definitely want to check him out. If you are thinking about doing a podcast, or you have a podcast and you need some help, or you want to have some PR work done for your podcast, this is the person you want to talk to, Jeremy Ryan Slate. Like I said, commandyourbrand.com. That's where you're going to find him. All right. That's about it. Thanks for joining us.